have been making quite a few videos just because I feel like we are out of time, and it's like I don't want to leave anything unsaid, and so I decided to, I feel like my last couple of videos didn't really talk about the importance of loving one another and following the Ten Commandments, and I wanted to kind of explain to you all how I believe that the Ten Commandments is basically God's love book for humanity, and basically a lot of people can think that they're just rules, but they are the blueprint for loving your neighbor, loving yourself, and loving God properly. And so I wanted to go ahead and read them to you and kind of put in some information on things that I've learned about the Ten Commandments. And so here I just found it straight from the scripture. So you can their Ten Commandments are in a couple places in the Bible, but right now I'm just going through Exodus 22 through 17. It says, I am the Lord thy God, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow thyself unto them or serve them, for I am the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. So I just want to start with that. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of ways to love God and put God first, but I'm going to name a couple things. Putting God first, you can start with praying and surrendering your day to God each day, and praying for His will to be done, asking for Him to show you His will in your life, and laying down, putting aside what your desires and will are for yourself, and letting Him show you. And so that's one way. Putting things before God, tithing is also in there, because you should not put anything before God, and that includes money, includes everything that you own. And so giving that first 10% is showing God that you're not putting God before Him, or putting money before Him, I should say, sorry. But anyways, so there's that. As far as making any graven image or any likeness of anything that's in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or in the water of the earth, that's basically describing the angels, God, Jesus, or Satan. And these images are all around the world, and most of them are an abomination due to the fact because the images of the devil, that's not what he looks like. The images of the angels, that's not what they look like. And God is, most of the time, God is giving you these rules out of protection. For example, He doesn't want you to make any carved images or any likenesses of anything like Jesus, because He knows Satan's tactics. They're using their gods for example, they renamed the statues in the Vatican, Jesus and Mary, when it was really their deities, and like the moon goddess. And for example, in the baby in the manger is probably Tammuz, and I'm not saying that Jesus wasn't born in a manger, but the baby that they're making you put in your house is more than likely not Jesus. And he tells you these things out of protection. And not only that, because like for example, you can wear a cross necklace or whatever, but or have little angel figurines, but the problem is the lies when you start to look to those things for protection. Those are just symbols. They do not protect you or save you in any way. It's all Jesus and God. And so He's protecting you from these things becoming more than what they ought to be, And so anyways, those things are made for our learning and so on, but we have to remember that this is Satan's world, and God wants to protect us from the things and Satan's schemes. And so if you follow the Ten Commandments, it's for your good. You're inviting demons into your home by allowing these things in your house, and it's just an abomination. And so take it to the Lord. Take everything I say to you to the Lord. I'm sure that there's more to this than that. The same thing with the pictures of Jesus. The Catholic Church used Caesar Borgia we don't know who Caesar Borgia is, you know. So I don't want, he doesn't want you worshiping pictures or anything like that, including the Last Supper picture. I would recommend removing that from your house. I won't go into all the details, but when my sister mentioned her demons' names, she mentioned Leonardo da Vinci, which I thought was interesting, and he is the one who painted the picture of the Last Supper. And so, you know, if it was a demon or a fallen angel or a deity that made that image, I don't think I want it in my house. I don't care if they're painting Jesus. You can't trust everything in this world, and I'm sorry to say that, but you know, God did this for your protection. He's not trying to ruin your life or anything like that. So anyways, I'm going to move on. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Okay, so let's just stop there. So obviously we know that people use God's name in a curse word. I'm not going to say that. But a lot of people think, oh, well, God doesn't care about that. God cares a lot more than you think about a lot of things, but he's a gentle God, until his wrath comes. He will punish the wicked, and he will bring people to the knowledge of the truth. But, you know, he's very slow to anger, and he has patience. And so he's, you know, we need to have a fear of the Lord, and we need to take him seriously, and we need to have respect and reverence for God. And not only that, but it says in the book of Moses that his name is I am who I am. And so anytime you're using the word I am ugly, I'm this, I'm not good enough, you're doing the same thing, because God lives in each one of us. And same thing if you're calling so-and-so crazy, or you're making fun of people that are disabled and so on. God created everybody the way that they are, and God can turn that around in 2 seconds, and God is in every one of us. So that you're insulting God by insulting anybody or calling anybody stupid or empty-headed, because God is in everyone. And basically the intelligence, if he wanted that person to know how to do whatever he wanted them to know, he would show them and tell them. And he has a purpose for people being simple, and you know, he's just testing other people. If you are a leader or you've been given great knowledge or very smart, be grateful and know that it comes from God, and that he puts you in that position, and he can very well take it away. You know, you must remain humble. And so anyways, and then remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days thou shalt labor and do thy work, but on the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God, and in it you shall not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy maidservant, or manservant, nor the cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Okay, so the seventh day is holy. It's a day of rest. It's a day to slow down, to, you know, come back to God. It's a day of blessing. So basically that would be Friday sundown to Saturday sundown. And it changes day to day. If you want to know what time the sundown starts in your area, you can just Google sundown time, and it will tell you when it starts. And he actually made this pretty easy by making it, you know, half of one day and half of the other, where you still have time in each day to do what you want to do. And so I think that's really neat that he did it that way. And anyway, so the Sabbath, I was trying to think of where the scripture is, so I think it's in Leviticus. I'm not sure which number, but it tells you about the Sabbath. We know that it's, if you look in Genesis, like in the first couple sentences, it says when he created the day, he said he created the evening, and then the day was the first day. So the day doesn't start at 12 a.m. the way that they have it now. It starts the evening, the day before, and so it says you have the evening, and then the day was the first day, and that's where it is. It's found in Genesis, first couple sentences. Okay, so we have, honor thy mother and thy father, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Okay, so a lot of people, he wants you not to speak evil of your mother and your father. He wants you to love them and just treat them with honor and respect anytime you speak about them, and also to help them in their old age. God will hold people accountable for these things if we are not loving our parents and helping them in their time of need. Another one is thou shalt not kill. That would also include abortion. I would even take birth control to the Lord. And the basic other killing. Okay, so thou shalt not commit adultery. That one's pretty self-explanatory. You need to treat your spouse right. We need to love our spouses properly and be, honorable and honest. And okay, so thou shalt not steal. Obviously, that's another way of loving people properly. Not stealing from people is a proper way of loving people and treating them right. Thou shalt not bear false witness. This one is can be sneaky because you think that you're not ever bearing false witness, but this is where gossip comes in. First of all, if you hear gossip and you repeat it to somebody else and you don't have the full story, you could be bearing false witness. If you don't have the full story and you weren't there, stay out of it. And this includes celebrities, government, so on. You can expose the evil without naming names and telling, so-and-so's story, and this person did this and this person did that. And try to shut down gossip because, gossip, there's so much into gossip. So, obviously, when you are talking negative about somebody, you're creating negative for them. We don't want to do that. We want to pray for them. We want to pray for our enemies if they're an enemy. But also, the other reason why you want to shut down somebody else, if you're not the one gossiping, but you're allowing somebody else to gossip, you are opening the doorway of you accidentally now gossiping what you just heard to somebody else. And you don't know anything about it. You weren't there. And so it's just best to, if somebody wants to tell you themselves, and I'm not saying that, obviously you're going to have to find out some things. We need to know, and God will expose things to us so that we will know what's going on. But just be very careful if somebody is just, constantly bashing somebody. Put an end to that. Just stop. I don't want to hear it anymore. You know what I mean? I've already made my decision to just love them anyways, no matter what, and I pray for them no matter what. I don't need to hear all of this. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his maidservant, nor manservant, or his ox, or his ass, or anything that is thy neighbor's. So obviously, we need to be okay with the will that God has given each one of us. We need to know that every person is a piece of the puzzle in God's world, and everybody has something to offer, and God has made everybody unique. Everybody has a different purpose, and we need to appreciate what God has given us. And if you don't, I think there was a story in the Bible where, I think it was with David, when David went and committed adultery and found another wife with Bathsheba. God basically asked him and said, well, if you wanted more, you could have just came to me and asked me instead of going and, sinning and taking somebody else's wife and so on. Same thing to you. If you're not happy with the things in your life, speak to Jesus about it. Speak to God about it. And, say, hey, and instead of coveting your neighbor, we want everybody to be blessed. And, everybody, we shouldn't. Another thing that I feel like coveting is when we're just putting yourself in the shopping malls and the magazines and all these things where we're just looking at what everybody has, and we're just constantly in this state of want instead of gratefulness. it's like a sickness, and it becomes addictive, and you just want more and more and more, and you're never satisfied. Stay clear of that stuff. Like, just, I'm not saying you can't ever buy anything, but if you're just constantly looking and looking and looking at all these things that you don't have and so on, it's like a disease. But I wanted to go back to one of these other ones. So when it says right here about the Sabbath, so when it says that you can't do any work on the Sabbath, there is also scripture that says that you should prepare your food and your drinks the day before. But also on here I wanted to point out that it says that nobody else can do any work for you. So that means that you cannot go into a store and buy food, because basically there shouldn't be any passing of money on the Sabbath either, to try to sum that up to you. So that means you can't go to the store. I still use like the gas pump, or there are times and places that I found that where I can still get things I need outside without going inside of a store and having somebody work. Because the other thing I try to point out is everybody says, well, oh, God did away with all this stuff. I don't think so. I can almost guarantee you that if you went to heaven today, that we would be celebrating the Sabbath. And so I don't believe that he did away with any of this stuff. I think that it is very important to him, and that you need to, part of following this stuff here is, because these are things we're still going to have to do in heaven, I believe. And so if you hate to do it here, God's going to be like, well, you must hate to be in my kingdom. You got to think of it that way, you know what I mean? And so, anyways, I just wanted to show you that basically the Ten Commandments is a love story on how to love one another, how to treat one another. And I believe that God is holding us accountable for loving one another, and we really need to have a fear of the Lord when it comes to who's coming up to you and asking you for help right now, and how are you treating them, and are you being of good service to them? And if it's something that you feel like you don't have or you can't do, take it to the Lord and say, hey, I will come back to you. And God does say in the Bible that you should never put somebody off until tomorrow if you have it now. But you can always take it to the Lord and say, hey, Lord, is this from you? Do you want me to do this, or whatever it is? So anyways, I wanted to show you guys this, a couple movies. So a few movies have helped me get closer to God. Like if you're trying to learn the Bible quickly, these movies I feel like are really good, and they teach you a good character. So this one is of Esther. It's called One Night with the King. I feel like this was a really great movie as far as learning how to stand strong in your faith and for the Lord. This one, Amazing Love, is about Hosea, and he marries Gomer, and God told him to marry her, and she was not going to be faithful. And she represents Israel, and I just think this is an amazing story, and it shows God's love for us and how he forgives us and has grace for us. The story of Ruth, basically I think is a really good one, because this shows a lady who was a priestess, and she was basically part of the satanic occult. She was sacrificing children, and it shows you the things that are still continuing to go on today. But she finds a Christian man, and she turns her faith and ends up following God. So she goes against that. The other one is this one with the Ten Commandments. You got to find the one with him in it. But this is like a really great one that I really feel like taught me a lot about Moses and God, and just basically the whole story of the Bible. I think that this is like a must watch. So that's it on the movies. There's tons more, obviously. You want to watch Noah's Ark and so on. But another one that I feel like is, if you're wanting fast learning, is these things. If you just go on YouTube and you type, story of, like on this one I put the story of Exodus, and you can start from the very beginning, and this guy goes really fast when he shows them. But I want to just show you a small one. They're really small. It's like a little comic where he shows you. But if you go from one to the next, like if you watch this one, then it'll automatically go to the next one. And if you go all the way through Kings, you'll see, because one of the things that is really hard to do when you're reading the Bible is getting the stories in order. He puts them in order and makes it make sense. And so I think it's really awesome, and it starts to put the story together of the whole Bible in a sequence. And so I'm going to let you play some of this.
Egypt, and he had saved his whole family in a famine. The book of Exodus It's the second book of the Bible, and it picks up the storyline from the previous book, Genesis, which ended with Abraham's grandson, Jacob, leading his large family of 70 people down to Egypt. Now, Jacob's 11th son, Joseph, had been elevated to second in command over Egypt, and he had saved his whole family in a famine. And so Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, offered the family to come live there as a safe haven. And so eventually Jacob dies there in Egypt, and Joseph and all his brothers do too. About 400 years pass, and the story of the Exodus begins. Now that name refers to the event that takes place in the first half of the book, Israel's exodus from Egypt. But the book has a second half that takes place at the foot of Mount Sinai. In this video, we'll just focus on the first half, where centuries have passed, and the Israelites were fruitful and multiplied, and they filled the land. Now, this line is a deliberate echo back to the blessing that God gave all humanity back in the Garden of Eden. And it reminds us of the big biblical story so far. Humanity forfeited God's blessing through sin and rebellion, and so God chose Abraham's family as the vehicle through which he would restore his blessing to all the world. But the new Pharaoh does not view Israel as a blessing. He actually thinks this growing Israelite immigrant group is a threat to his power. And so just as in Genesis, humanity rebels against God's blessing, so here Pharaoh attempts to destroy the source of God's blessing, the Israelites. He brutally enslaves them in forced labor, and then he orders that all the Israelite boys be drowned in the Nile River. Now, Pharaoh, he is the worst character in the Bible so far. His kingdom epitomizes humanity's rebellion against God. Pharaoh has so redefined good and evil according to his own interests that even the murder of innocent children has become good to him. And so Egypt has become worse than Babylon from the book of Genesis, and so now Israel cries out for help against this new Babylon, and God responds. God first turns Pharaoh's evil upside down, as an Israelite mother throws her boy into the Nile River, but in a basket. And so he floats safely right down into Pharaoh's own family. He's named Moses, and he grows up to eventually become the man that God will use to defeat Pharaoh's evil. In the famous story of the burning bush, God appears to Moses and commissions him to go to Pharaoh and order him to release the Israelites. And God says that he knows Pharaoh will resist, and so he will bring his judgment on Egypt in the form of plagues. Then God also says that he will harden Pharaoh's heart. And so we're introduced into the next main part of the story, the confrontation between God and Pharaoh. Now, what does this mean that God says he'll harden Pharaoh's heart? It's super important to read this section of the story really closely and in sequence. In Moses and Pharaoh's first encounter, we're told simply that Pharaoh's heart grew hard. There's no implication that God did anything. And so in response, God sends the first set of 5 plagues, each one confronting Pharaoh and one of his Egyptian gods. And each time, Moses offers a chance for Pharaoh to humble himself and to let the Israelites go. But after each plague, we're told that Pharaoh either hardened his heart or that his heart grew hard. He's doing this of his own will. And so eventually it's with the second set of 5 plagues that we begin to hear how God hardened Pharaoh's heart. So the point of the story seems to be this. Even though God knew that Pharaoh would resist his will, God still offered him all of these chances to do the right thing. But eventually Pharaoh's evil reaches a point of no return. I mean, even his own advisors think that he has lost his mind. And it's at that point that God takes over and bends Pharaoh's evil towards his own redemptive purposes. God lures Pharaoh into his own destruction as he saves his people, which is what happens next. With the final plague, it's the night of Passover, and God turns the tables on Pharaoh. Just as he killed the sons of the Israelites, so God will kill the firstborn in Egypt with a final plague. But unlike Pharaoh, God provides a means of escape through the blood of the Lamb. And here the story stops and introduces us in detail to the annual Israelite ritual of Passover. On the night before Israel left Egypt, they sacrificed a young, spotless lamb and painted its blood on the doorframe of their house. And when the divine plague came over Egypt, the houses covered with the blood of the lamb were passed over, and the sun spared. And so every year since, the Israelites have reenacted that night to remember and to celebrate God's justice and his mercy. But Pharaoh, because of his pride and rebellion, he loses his own son, and he's compelled to finally let the Israelites go free. And so the Israelite slaves make their exodus from Egypt. But no sooner do they leave that Pharaoh changes his mind, and he gathers his army and chases after the Israelites for a final showdown. As the Israelites pass through the waters of the sea safely, Pharaoh charges towards his own destruction. The Exodus story concludes with the first song of praise in the Bible. It's called the Song of the Sea. And the final line declares that the Lord reigns as king. And then the song retells in poetry what the story of God's kingdom is all about. It's about how God is on a mission to confront evil in his world and to redeem those who are enslaved to evil. God is going to bring his people into the promised land where his divine presence will live among them. This story is what it looks like when God becomes king over his people. So after the Israelites sing their song, the story takes a sharp turn. The Israelites, they're trekking through the wilderness on their way to Mount Sinai, and they're hungry, they're thirsty, and they start criticizing Moses and God for even rescuing them. They say they long for the good old days in Egypt. I mean, it's crazy. So God graciously provides food and water for Israel in the wilderness, but these stories, they cast a dark shadow. And we begin to wonder, could it be that Israel's heart is just as hard as Pharaoh's? We shall see. But for now, that's the first half of the book of Exodus.
Okay, and then what I like about this, so all you have to do is you could say, you go on YouTube and you can type the story of Exodus and look for the one with the comic. And you could say the story of Moses, you could say the story of Abraham. But if you start from closer to the beginning, like maybe start with Noah and work your way through, they're really quick. And it really paints the Bible in order, and it kind of shows you, what I like is how he points out God's like purpose and how he used the timelines and what he was trying to do. And it's always been the same thing, is to bring people to following him, because God allows us to follow our own way for a while. Like, he allows the nations to go on their own way, but then he then wants to show them his way so that they can choose. Okay, in the end, they make a choice, so God will show them their way, then show them his way, and then in the end he expects them to choose. And so it's always been kind of the same thing. God's not necessarily forcing us to follow him, but he's going to show us our own way, his way, and then in the end he wants you to choose what you believe is best. And so there's also a time in the story of Moses where when at one point the Israelites had to decide which side they were on, and then they had a battle against one another. Well, I believe we're in that stage right now where God is separating the wheats from the tares again, because he does this over and over again. And there's always a remnant, and the remnant is the one who chooses to stay faithful to God and follow him no matter how hard it gets. And they just, that's where we're at. He's gonna, those who have chose him today will go in the rapture, and those who are on the fence will be left behind. And then in the tribulation, you will have to make your choice. Everybody has to make a choice in this life. Are you going to follow yourself, man, or are you going to follow God? And so, anyways, I just wanted to point out to you, because a lot of people call this stuff legalism or whatever, but if you really look at it, it's all about loving one another, the importance of loving one another and treating one another right. And I think that it's all a love story on how to treat each other, how to be good to one another. And so for anybody to sit here and say that this has been done away with, I'd have to question if you really know Jesus and God, because God is all about love, and that's the most important thing to him. And it even says in the Bible that if you love me, you will keep my commands. And not just the 10 Commandments. If Jesus is asking you to do something, do not reject him. Do what he's saying. And if you are struggling, or you have a hardened heart, or some reason you don't want to do it, or you're struggling to battle with your flesh to let it go, tell him, lay it at his feet, confess it to him, tell him, hey, I am too stubborn, or I'm too lazy, or I don't believe in that, or I have a fear, or I'm afraid I'm gonna whatever, lay it at his feet, pray to him, tell him, I'm a coward, I'm like Peter, I'm not willing to die, whatever. He already knows. So just tell him. All you're doing is you're coming out of the denial that there's something wrong, and you're telling him, and he will resolve it for you. All you have to do is give an inch, and he will give a mile. And I'm telling you that God is good, and that he will deliver you. And anyways, I love you all. I'll see you on the next video. Bye.